All across Missouri, our new car and truck dealers are building strong local economies. When you buy a car or truck in Missouri, you're helping to support over 20,000 Missouri families who rely on the auto industry for good-paying local jobs. You're also helping fund our communities, schools, first responders, and our roads because dealers generate millions of dollars in tax revenue. Missouri's automobile dealers have been the foundation of our communities for generations and for generations to come. The Missouri Automobile Dealers Association, the heart of Missouri.
Welcome to This Week in Missouri Politics. This week on a very busy week as the governor starts announcing his vetoes and actually the mayor come up with a big public policy initiative. We're very fortunate to be joined by one of the rising stars in the Republican Party, Representative Elijah Haahr from Springfield. Representative, welcome.
Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.
Very glad to have you on This Week in Missouri Politics. It's always one of the greatest, the funnest things we get to do here is talk to some of the rising stars, some of the names that a lot of folks in Jeff City know, but now some of the folks around the state are getting to know in the political world, and you're certainly one of those up-and-comers. And want to talk to you about the House has a new speaker.
We do.
Tell us about the new speaker.
Todd Richardson is from Poplar Bluff, Missouri. Obviously, his dad served in the Missouri legislature back in the 90s and 2000s, and Todd is a tremendous asset to the state of Missouri. He's one of the smartest men in the building, very articulate. He has an ability to break down complicated ideas into really understandable discussion points for the caucus and for the representatives, and has a real opportunity. He's got possibility of serving 3 years as Speaker, has an opportunity to really leave his mark on the state, and I think the state will be better for it.
And so now there's a race to replace him as Majority Leader.
That's correct.
Tell us a little bit about it. I think some of our viewers have seen some of the candidates, but give us a little rundown.
So what we're going to do is we're going to elect the next floor leader at our summer caucus the end of July. 3 candidates are running. Mike Searpoy from Jackson County, who is the assistant floor leader. Mike's been one of those stalwarts in the party for a long time. He's kind of a senior member of the party and kind of a calm, cool, guiding hand in the back of the room. Then we've got Caleb Rowden from Boone County, Columbia. Caleb is probably the top technological guy in the caucus. He's great at communication, ability to take our views and our legislation that we pass and produce it in such a way that we can market it to the voters and kind of show them what we're doing. A lot of times our party fails in that medium, and Caleb's one of the best at doing that. And the last candidate is Robert Cornejo from St. Peter's. Robert's an attorney. Robert and I actually went to law school together. One of those incredibly bright individuals who has done so much good work this year. He did a lot of work on SB 5 and the municipal court reform, and Robert's just a tremendous advocate on the floor. So we've got 3 candidates. All 3 will be fantastic. All 3 would do a great job, and the caucus is lucky to have such a diverse group running for that position.
Well, you certainly have a lot of members of your caucus to pick from, right?
We do. Our caucus is at historic highs, so it's a nice problem to have.
So a bill that you took up this past year was due to sex trafficking. You had some support from Congresswoman Ann Wagner and many others. Kind of walk us through that bill and why you chose that particular issue to work on.
We actually ended up with 2 trafficking bills this year that I was able to handle. One dealt with criminalizing the advertisement of trafficking. Congresswoman Wagner and I had actually met the day that we both filed for office. She was filing for Congress and I was filing for state representative. We stood in the line together, and so I've followed her career, and one of the pieces of legislation that she had is called the SAVE Act, and it stopped the advertising of victims and exploitation. So I talked to her office.
Just so we know, that's like the back of Riverfront Times type thing, right?
That's right. Basically, there's a variety of different mediums where people advertise trafficked victims. Most commonly, the internet is where they're starting to do it. Backpage.com is the primary example, but there's also low-tech ways. They'll put them in papers. They'll leave cards in bus stops and truck stops. And really what we'd found is that there was a loophole in the law that we'd never contemplated, that we need to go after the advertisers. So she filed the bill at the federal level, and I filed this one at the state level. The second one that we did was to put together a human trafficking task force. And what we wanted to do is create a task force that would have input from a variety of people around the state. Sheriffs, prosecuting attorneys, some non-governmental organizations. They would meet several times, and they would come back to the legislature with some concrete goals and policy proposals on what we could do. That trafficking task force is about put together. We're filling out the last couple spots on it. And, you know, several years ago, Missouri was one of the top states in the country for our trafficking enforcement laws. And we haven't done anything in a few years, and what we'd like to do is get back to that point where we're one of the top 2 or 3 states in the country. And so that's really the goal for this trafficking task force.
Let's talk about the minimum wage here. The mayor of St. Louis, one of the most popular elected officials in the state, come out with a plan to raise the minimum wage in the city of St. Louis to $15 an hour. Does that, from a state perspective, is that how the legislature's been a little critical of individual cities doing this on their own? What's your position on this?
You know, I don't think they statutorily have the ability to do that. There's already legislation that's been passed in years past that says in statute that a city or municipality cannot have a minimum wage larger than what the state has. And what you don't want necessarily 2 or 3 places that have completely different business climates than everywhere else in the state. You want somewhat of an even playing field for everybody to play in. And I think one of the issues you see is you see this crop up around the country, this move to dramatically increase and nearly double the minimum wage. And the concern you run into is, do you squelch business by doing that? Do you drive business out into other states if you do that?
It seems like part of the discussion here is you have Southern Missouri competes against Arkansas. Right. Arkansas has an economic climate that's pretty aggressively competing. Maybe not as developed, but trying to get there. Kansas obviously has become a very aggressive competitor, and Illinois is not that aggressive. Sometimes I think for people in St. Louis to understand what Springfield competes against or Southern Missouri, how do you pull the state together? Because you are competing against very different climates. How do you pull a state together and have an economic plan that works for Springfield and St. Louis?
Yeah, and that's one of the important things that we look at is not just Arkansas and Kansas, but Oklahoma has been very aggressive in the past 10 years of trying to essentially poach business from the states around it. And that's one of the things that we're trying to do in the state legislatures. We look at this every year. What can we do to make the state more attractive to business that want to come in? And I think one of the things that you worry about is if a large industry is looking to relocate to Missouri, they want to know that they've got some business climate that is going to be consistent and it's going to be fair and it's going to be just. And there's a fear that if they move to Missouri and then their town decides we're going to do something that may push that business away, they're not necessarily going to have that incentive to move to the state. And I think that's the concern that a lot of people have.
Walk us through what are the top things you see that Missouri needs to do to be competitive? I mean, I have a hard time understanding if you were starting a business in the Kansas City area, why you would not form that business in Kansas. Why would you want to pay more of your income to the government?
I think that the 2 best things that Missouri can do, one which we started last year with the tax cut projects. The 2 things or 2 or 3 things the state can do. One is going to have an economic climate that a state wants to move to. So lower taxes, less regulation on business. That's number 1. The second thing that you can do is access to talent. You need to have a very well-educated workforce that a business can draw from.
That costs money. How do you balance that?
It can cost money, but it also it requires spending your money in a smart way. You don't want to waste it. There are some states that are able to develop their talent through their public education system and the university system in a much more efficient way than we've done. At the same time, our university system is funded 47th in the nation. That's something that we need to take a hard look at over the next few years and decide how are we going to fix that issue.
One of the arguments you're talking about manufacturing jobs, recruiting manufacturers. they don't necessarily require 4-year degrees in philosophy.
They don't.
They require maybe more of the programs community colleges offer.
Absolutely.
Is that the future of moving some of that from ivory towers to actual practical things that prepare you for a job?
I think community colleges are a great step for a state to take, especially when you talk about those industry jobs. They provide those technical education that they might need for factory work and really high income jobs for blue-collar workers.
I mean, it seems to me you're talking about spending your money smart.
Right.
Talking about recruiting industry being top of things. How do you not shift that money from ivory towers do you support moving some of that money to where the priorities you're laying out are? And
I think that's what you have to do, is you have to figure out if the state's going to be partners with the public university system, they have to look at how those public dollars be best spent, and like you said, I think in ways that we provide education and achievement in areas that are very useful to the state.
That comes up to a lot of folks talk about right to work.
That's right.
Right to work, the data. Lay out the case. What is the case for passing right to work?
You know, if you look across the station, you compare and contrast the states that have right to work versus the states that don't have right to work. Across the board, the states have right to work, have higher job growth, they have more people employed, they have better economies than the states that don't. And I think that's one of the things when businesses look to relocate.
You're making a trade, though, for more jobs that pay less as opposed to fewer jobs that pay more.
I don't think so. I think when you look at what people earn and what their cost of living is, they will have a better value if they're working in a right-to-work state than those that don't. You know, the price of no job is significant to an economy of a state. And that's what you see across the state, is the states that don't have right to work are losing jobs and losing workforce to the states that do have it.
Is unemployment a problem in Missouri? Is that what we're trying to address with this?
I think unemployment's a problem everywhere. But it's not just unemployment, it's also employment in the right kind of jobs. You know, if you have people that are working some part-time jobs, they may be employed, but those aren't the kind of jobs that you can support a family on.
The reverse argument to that, obviously, would be that if the problem is not necessarily the availability of jobs, but the quality of jobs, the one thing the data will show, Oklahoma grows faster. It's a right-to-work state. Maybe there's some oil and other things, but I think the data would show that. They would also show you make less. So if the problem in Missouri isn't scarcity, but it's quality, I think some folks would you see the argument in people that say, hey, why don't you cut taxes? I mean, cutting taxes definitely puts money back into people's wallets.
Right. And I think that's why I list them in those order. Number one is always going to be the economic climate.
Sure.
The price of the tax burden on both the individuals and on the employers, I think, will always be number one when it comes to job growth and the quality of an economic status in the state.
As we move forward, and you're somebody that's talked about being a future in leadership, is cutting Missouri's tax rate a priority?
Yes.
And last question. People do talk about you as maybe a future candidate for leadership. What are your thoughts on that?
You know, obviously it's flattering to hear people say that, and I don't think anybody gets into the government without a desire to effectuate change. And the way you effectuate change is on the floor. You can do it in committee, and obviously if you're in leadership, you have an ability to do that. So yes, I'd be interested in the possibility of moving into that role if those opportunities present themselves.
Representative, as time goes by, you're always welcome here on This Week in Missouri Politics. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you. It's a real pleasure to be on.
And we'll be right back with our Opinion Maker panel.
All across Missouri, our new car and truck dealers are building strong local economies. When you buy a car or truck in Missouri, you're helping to support over 20,000 Missouri families who rely on the auto industry for good-paying local jobs. You're also helping fund our communities, schools, first responders, and our roads, because dealers generate millions of dollars in tax revenue. Missouri's automobile dealers have been the foundation of our communities for generations and for generations to come. The Missouri Automobile Dealers Association, the heart of Missouri.
Welcome back to This Week in Missouri Politics. We're now joined by our Opinion Maker panel. We have a couple new debuts I'm very excited about. First of all, Collin Reischman, the editor of the Missouri Times out of Jefferson City, Missouri. David Barklage, Republican political operative extraordinaire. I would list all the things, but we don't have time. Senator Joe Keaveny, fresh out of Jefferson City for 5 months, so he's ready to party, I guess, ready to relax and have a good time. And very special debut for us, Mark Reardon from KMOX is with us this week. And Mark, welcome.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you for having me.
And Senator Keaveny, I'd like for you to get let's start with you. The reaction to Representative Haar's interview.
About which one? About the right to work?
About the whole thing. I mean, when you look across from the Senate to the House, see some up and comers. What do you think? People you can work with?
Oh, sure. I look forward to meeting. Well, I met him, but to working with the new speaker, Todd Richardson. I've known him for a number of years, and he's a guy that I think we can really move things forward with.
Collin, you cover Representative all the time. What did you think?
Oh, I thought he did a great job. Representative Haahr is a really articulate guy. He's young, he's likable. I don't know a whole lot of people who have a personal problem with him at all, so I have a feeling he's going to do just fine working with folks.
David Barklage, do you have a personal problem with the representative?
No, as you know, his dad actually hired me to sort of build and create the modern House Campaign Committee back in the mid-'90s. So I have a long relationship. They are a very talented family, and I think he will be not only a talented speaker, but I think he might be the best speaker we've seen. He doesn't have that Senate, House, we've got to have a problem between us. I think he gets that, and that's always been frustrating to see just the matter that you're in one body or the other, that creates a divide. It's a bad distraction. I think Todd is going to make a big difference in setting the tone to help the two bodies work together.
Mark Reardon, you get to see these folks as they come up through the ranks. Maybe the first time you saw Representative Haarr.
I don't like him. I'm just going to tell you right now. I'm just trying to be different from the
You're
rest
the personal
of the panel.
problem. No, I figured so, yeah.
I just hope, here's my hope, Scott, that he's not speaker next term, because unfortunately the pattern has been a little bit of a quick turnaround with speakers. But I like to see young talent in the Republican Party, people who are smart, people who have good ideas. So I think there's a lot of bench power there that perhaps isn't revealed too much in the media.
Well, I'm sure Representative Haarr doesn't wish he would be speaker in a year that way either, but we'll see.
Right.
What he did talk about was right to work. The governor vetoed right to work this week. What's your take?
Well, I think that you and I have talked about this on my show, and I think that the veto is probably going to hold. I think that the legislature was in a similar position with the bill, the tax cut a year ago. The numbers are not too off the mark. I think they have the votes in the Senate. It's going to be a tough haul. And I think what happened, going back to what I just comically referenced, I think what happened to John Deal hurts the case of right to work, because not only does it make the Republicans lose a vote, but he was a strong ally in putting a coalition together to pass that bill. So unfortunately, I think it, because I'm a supporter of right to work, I don't think it's going to be overturned.
You do love the government more than I do, as we discussed on KMOX.
Your Obamacare, comparison is so utterly ridiculous, Scott.
Hey, Mark, the last time big politicians came and said, Scott, we're going to help your small business. We got a law for you. It's going to help you a lot. It was Obamacare.
Okay, but you're talking about a big federal cumbersome law. This is nothing like that at all.
Senator Keaveny, does the veto hold?
I think so. Right to work has been has been an issue since 1978, and we had a vote, and both of them came well short of an override vote. People knew what they were voting for. I think those votes hold.
Collin, you followed this. We've had the discussion privately. They might have overridden this in the House. That might not be the case now, right?
I have trouble seeing where they're going to be able to find those votes in the House, partly because you talk about the leadership change, and I think you have a new speaker now, Todd Richardson, who has to decide if he's going to really try really hard to get these votes in the House the way that maybe Representative Deal would have if he was still speaker. But I have trouble seeing them being able to override in both chambers. Maybe you get one or the other, but I really have trouble finding
David Barklage, how many hundreds of phone calls have you been on where right to work came up?
Well, here's the thing. I think I'm going to be on a heck of a lot more, because this is not just about right to work. I think you see the swagger of the unions, the arrogance is going to come forward, and they're going to overreach and try to punish all Republicans, many Republicans. They're going to try to buy a governor's race. They're going to try to use this as a beachhead for the presidential to help win the Senate. So I think Republicans are going to find themselves in an unenviable position that they started on right to work, but it's going to end on a fight for 2016. And I think that if the Republicans, the rank and file, are going to start to realize that their vote isn't just for or against right to work, it's for or against if you're going to invite 10, 20, 30, 40, $50 million of union money, expertise, and organization into the 2016 elections, because that's what they will do if they know the legislature is capable of passing right to work. They're going to go all in for a governor and everything else they can. So I think this is candidly a fight over the Republican Party's dominance in Missouri or survival.
Survival. Mark Reardon, 117 members in the House, 20-some senators. Seems like they're going to survive.
You mean that the veto will be?
No, the Republican Party survives in Missouri.
But I think
makes it to the next
But I
day.
agree with David from this perspective that I think that, and I don't think you roll over here and say, okay, this veto is going to hold. I think the Republicans need to spend the next couple of months, see if the votes are there, and position it the way that David says, because I think there is a lot on the line for the future. And I think it's possible. I do, even though I would handicap, and I'm a betting man, Scott, that they're not going to be able to override. I think there's a chance, and I'd like to see it work.
He brings up a good point. There are a lot of reasons for Republicans to support Chris Koster. This might be one where this is an issue that will probably separate the Republican from Koster in the governor's race. But Jay Nixon's having a good week, right? I mean, how many times does everybody rally around the governor right now?
I was with him yesterday afternoon at the sheet metal workers. The place was full. People, this is an issue that's going to gin up a lot of interest. And as for 2016, the governor's race, the issue was right to work. The issue is about driving down wages in the state of Missouri. And if we veer off the issue for some extraneous reason, then I think we lose our focus. I think we need to stay on.
That's such a false narrative, though, the whole drive down wages, because that's based on the South, where we have right to work states where the cost of living and wages are lower. You guys like to bring that up all the time. It's just simply not true.
I believe it is.
I actually was noticing Joe trying not to smile after I gave my summation about all this money coming in to help Democrats.
David, is this an issue though that'll be used against Koster? I mean, there are reasons why some Republicans will support Koster. It used to be one. Mm-hmm. Is this an issue that defines him versus whoever the Republican is?
I think the bigger issue is actually if the Supreme Court rules on Obamacare. I think Medicaid expansion, I think Obamacare, I think Republicans having to come up with answers to how we fix health care, and Democrats with Hillary Clinton who supported universal health care. I think that's going to be a more dominant issue. But I agree. I think as Chris moves up the chain as a ex-Republican, I think that, there are questions of his own party, so it forces him farther to the left. So I think he has to embrace it. But in reference to this being a good week for Governor Nixon, the only good weeks Governor Nixon have are weeks where, he's doing nothing by just saying no on legislation or appearing before cameras. He's trying to get back from his debacle in Ferguson, but candidly, the guy just doesn't have too many good weeks. I mean, Joe, you know that his absence, his leadership for both parties in the legislature would be helpful in helping set things and get things done, things you care about. And I think you have a very good reputation. People respect you very well. And I think having a governor that would be behind some of your initiatives would be helpful in the legislature.
Well, sure. I mean, when we're outnumbered 24-9,
25.
25. But who's counting?
Yeah.
You're not on budget committee, are you?
But, I'm always looking for help. But I think it is unfair to blame the governor for the thing in Ferguson. He's taken a lot of hits.
Can we have this conversation in another show? I think we could have an
And I think we
entire
definitely
show.
have it in another show.
I don't think anyone's blaming Governor Nixon for Ferguson. They're saying that his leadership was inept. And if right to work is not the best route for Missouri to take, let's just take it into another direction. Where is his leadership? Look, we're going to talk about minimum wage, too. What businesses are going to want to move to Missouri? This is a decision factor. Right to work is from big business.
To be fair, that's a mayor.
And I would say, what business is going to move to a state and say, how little can I pay my workers?
Isn't this is what's going to be a fun summer, because Collin, looks like the governor likes talking about this issue, and everybody gets keyed up.
Yes.
We're talking about one in the demise of the Republican Party in Missouri. On the other end, we're talking about an issue that makes Jay Nixon in the news and rally support behind it.
Yeah, he was really, really energetic yesterday. He sometimes gets criticized for being a little aloof, for seeming like he's maybe sometimes bored when he's talking, but very, very energetic governor yesterday. Looked like he was happy to be doing what he was doing. Couldn't have been more excited.
Maybe he's going to run for president. Maybe we'll start
This
talking
could be the
about that
springboard,
again.
upholding this veto.
He'd have to switch to the Republican Party for that. What do you got, 16?
They could have like an intramural softball game. He could be on the team. But he did seem energetic when he held up his veto of the first tax cut. He was very engaged there, and he did well.
Look, it's easy to lead by just doing nothing. I mean, from his standpoint, show me an initiative that he's done in the legislature, and this is not a partisan attack. I would make the same criticism of Republican governor. This governor shows little interest to participate in the process and help find solutions and really change things. But he's very comfortable in using his veto pen. I don't think that's leadership.
Well, when he has poor weeks, he gets criticized. This week, he seemed to have a reason to fight. And
well,
he's leading the
you're
fight.
defining that because of a public event where he had some energy. I mean, even and David brought this up with Joe. The Democrats tell us this all the time. He's not there. He's not a good leader. He's been exposed, and that's what Ferguson was all about how poor of a leader he really is, because the state is not moving forward, and it's not the Republicans' fault in the legislature. I know you guys want to blame them, but it's mostly on the governor's.
Well, if we're lacking leadership in the governor's
unwillingness to work
office,
with
who's going to be the Republican standard bearer in 2016?
Well, I like Eric Greitens personally. David might disagree with me on that. I'd like to see someone who truly can lead, who's not just your typical politician. I'd like to see Eric get into this race officially. I know he's thinking about it. People don't even know his name. He's a former Navy SEAL. He's got an impeccable resume. But I think that's what people are hungry for. And Chris Koster is a very tough candidate. And he's very likable. And he's got a great voice and pretty hair. So he's not going to be easy to beat.
Senator, does Eric Greitens scare the Democrats?
I don't think so. I think the more that we get closer to the primary, a person like Eric Greitens, who really hasn't been exposed to this kind of pressure and this kind of exposure, I think the Democrats are very comfortable where we are.
Collin, won't it be interesting whenever he finally comes out and says, I'm doing this, I'm fully engaged in doing this, your inbox fills up, there'll be a vetting process, it'll be interesting to see how he handles it.
Well, yeah, because the first thing about every reporter in the state's going to want to know is, okay, well, there's about a dozen issues that are immediately in front of Missouri voters. Where are you on all of those issues? I mean, Catherine Hanaway.
And where have you been, right?
Yeah, and Senator Parson and the governor. I mean, anyone else who's in Chris Koster, most of them at least have stated their positions on most of the basic issues. And with Greitens, we don't really know a lot of that. So he's going to have to be doing a lot of interviews just explaining, like, how he feels about guns and abortion.
David Barklage, the Yoda of Republican politics. Who's the best? I know you have a horse in this race. Who's the best? And does Peter Kinder, hails from the same part of the state that we do, does he actually pull the trigger and run this time?
Are you really asking me these questions?
I pitched them both right to you.
Well, let me first start out. I want to clarify that Governor Nixon was not responsible for Ferguson in the first 48 hours. He's responsible for everything after that.
Well, let's talk about the next governor.
Look, I think we're going to have a healthy primary. I think because of the tragedy involving the auditor, I hope that the tone changes. I hope it changes for both parties, because politics of personal destruction is just not the way you need to get elected. In my business, I believe that people that use those kinds of tactics day in and day out just simply don't have the investment or intellectual capacity to sell a candidate on their own merits. Things
Well,
like
with
that.
just a few seconds left, when that dust settles, is Peter Kinder in that conversation?
I think he's still trying to figure out where he wants to go. We've been friends for a long time. I think that, Mike Parsons is making a very good run where he's at. Eric Greitens is a real up-and-coming talent. John Brenner, I think, is the best contrast from a standpoint of being an outsider. He's not a career politician. He can't be bought, and I think he is the one manager. And I always get frustrated. Republicans just want to cut and don't want to do the hard work.
We're going to have to cut This Week in Missouri Politics right there. And we'll see you next week.